Hi guys and welcome to Mobile App Daily. Today we have Lily Zhang with us who has years of experience as a DEI consultant, and we are going to talk about a topic that has gained notoriety and caused significant damage: layoffs. Lily has a profound experience as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for various organizations. Not just this, but Lily is also a social activist and keynote speaker and panelist to discuss topics including DEI, LGBTQ issues in the workplace, effective leadership, and organizational changes. Lily has done their master's and bachelor's at Stanford University and is an exceptional author too. Recently, Lily posted a not so ordinary perspective on layoffs on LinkedIn, which moved us to have a conversation with Lily today. Last year, a staggering 1,044 companies dismissed approximately 1,59,846 employees. And in just 2 months of 2023, 340 companies have let go of around 1,01,807 employees. As an individual with an impressive background as a DEI consultant, we would love to hear Lily's perspective on this subject. Your career has revolved around enlightening leaders and organizations to create workplaces for everyone. And we believe your input on this matter will be invaluable. So, how are you, Lily?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
That's good to hear. So, Lily, your impressive background as a DEI consultant has enabled you to help a wide range of organizations cut through the noise to achieve social progress. Could you share how your journey as a consultant and practitioner commenced?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So, my own journey as a consultant and practitioner started, of course, as someone with many marginalized identities, um, coming out as a queer person and as a trans person was a formative experience for me, and really started me on my own personal path to wanting to create a world where all people could survive and thrive. But as a practitioner, that step in my journey wasn't all that was needed, right? And I think about what I went through as an organizer and an activist starting from college, and my experiences then were interesting in that I participated in quite a few movements, in direct action, in many protests and rallies. And many times, in fact, we would go through an enormous amount of effort and not see the outcomes materialize in terms of greater equity, policy change, organizational change, and so on. What am I missing? What don't I know about how to create change? And this question took me into getting my master's in sociology. It took me into the diversity, equity, and inclusion industry, someone who organizational leaders and executives to make actual real change, to actually implement the policies, the processes, the culture that they need to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion as outcomes.
Amazing. Your journey tells a lot about your personality and perspectives. But I would like to know what's your first take on witnessing this huge number of layoffs around the world?
I think it's really a tragedy. We need to keep in mind that when layoffs happen, it's not just a matter of X company cut Y number of workers. People aren't numbers. Each person laid off, especially during mass layoffs, is a story of an avoidable tragedy. And the impact that especially mass layoffs have on people cannot be understated. There's some really sobering data. Mass layoffs increase the death rate by like 15 to 20%, I believe. It essentially lowers the life expectancy of someone who's laid off by almost 2 years. Suicide risk increases by up to 3 times. Depression risk doubles. Substance abuse risk increases by 4 times. Layoffs in general without even getting into why they happen, have an enormous impact on people. And I say this both as someone familiar with the research and with loved ones who have personally been laid off, as I'm sure many people listening to this have experienced as well. Layoffs hurt. They really, really hurt.
Definitely. Layoffs have done quite significant damage to people's personal lives as well as markets, industries, and whatnot. Also, I think the impact of layoffs on diversity, equity, and inclusion within an organization is substantial. Can you provide insight into the effects of these dismissals in the workplace?
Almost all layoffs have a disparate impact on women, on people of color, disabled folks, LGBTQ plus folks, and so on and so forth. And this is for a range of reasons. The primary one is that layoffs usually rely on heuristics, a set of informal rules that determine who's laid off. Most often, companies aren't just throwing a dart at their workforce and randomly laying people off. Usually, there's some method to it. One of the most common heuristics is what's called last in, first out. The most recent hires are the ones that are laid off. But there's something interesting that's also been happening recently in diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is that since 2020, companies have been hiring women, people of color, disabled folks, LGBTQ plus folks, and so on in much greater numbers than before. And so when you look at last in, first out as a heuristic, that's actually one of the most efficient ways to dramatically undo the last 3 years of progress and specifically work back the clock for these marginalized groups. And in general, it's not just last in, first out. Most heuristics that companies use essentially go by the logic of we're going to cut what's least important. And so that might be the most junior employees, the least tenured employees, contractors, specific roles like DEI roles, learning and development roles, people ops and HR roles, and so on. They're not thinking about the needs of their workforce and, frankly, the needs of their business going down the line. They're just looking to quickly cut costs.
Impressive. I think your views have moved us towards a different perspective. But we have seen many individuals trusted large corporations such as Microsoft and Google with their job security. As these tech giants participated in layoffs, how would you counsel and educate affected individuals?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing I will say is that if you personally have been affected by a layoff, or if a loved one has been affected by a layoff, know that you are not alone. This experience is bewildering. It's intensely frustrating and stressful, and these are common emotions. Please be kind to yourself. Please check in with your community, get the support you need, and know that this is not your fault. The advice that I'll give from there, especially if you're looking to find new positions, is that your network is your strength. Your best friends are actually not particularly likely to be sources of new job opportunities for you. They're not likely to know new opportunities for you to apply to. It turns out, research shows that it's their friends, their connections, that tend to know the opportunities, that tend to be folks who can help you get jobs. So reach out not just to your immediate circle, but to your friends' friends. Ask your friends, do you know anyone else who might know opportunities in my field, who might know someone that I should talk to? Be proactive, reach out, and also, be kind to yourself too. Don't go looking for jobs the second day you were laid off. Like, take some time to take stock, consider the direction that you want to go in, try to make the best of a rough situation.
Thanks, Lily. I hope people will positively benefit themselves from your solutions. Now, in your post, you mentioned the contagion effect of layoffs as a significant concern. Do you believe that this reason is more powerful than the recession itself?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. This is a bit of a pet peeve question for me, actually, because I've been taking questions in particular about the ongoing recession or the upcoming recession since late 2021, I believe, despite nearly every indicator in the last several years pointing to the fact that a recession isn't yet here. And also despite the well-known inability of economists to predict recessions. They're not particularly good at it. It's not hard to look back when a recession's already here and to say, how could we have missed this? But we're not great at saying because of what's going on right now, there's a recession. Now, I think when we say things like, what's the ongoing recession or what is this recession going to do, we are enabling the sort of logic that leaders use to make layoffs. We like to make the same assumptions, right? We assume that business leaders must be shrewd and hyperlogical and great decision makers. And we also tend to believe that layoffs are great business decisions to cut costs in preparation for recession and all that. And so we tell ourselves that if a layoff happens, then going backwards, it must have been a shrewd, cost-cutting decision made in preparation for recession, and it must have been necessary. But here's the thing, I'm a strong subscriber to the theory that leaders are human, leaders are people, right? They are not these robotic mathematical logic machines that just make the best decisions for their organizations at all times. We know leaders are flawed. And for most of the leaders that I've talked to, right, they're human. They want quick, clear solutions. They rely specifically on their industry peers for guidance, for perspective on the world. They don't want to be caught by surprise. And so there are a few factors that predict why they will make layoffs. One, research shows that having a peer, having another company in your industry close to you make layoffs is an enormous factor that will predict whether you make layoffs. Having peers that don't make layoffs means that you will likely not want to do it either. Because we worry, right? Leaders in particular worry that they're missing something, that they're missing a cue, and that if a company's made a layoff, it must be because they've seen something that we've missed, and so we should probably do the same thing as well. Another big factor is that especially in corporate America, and increasingly around the world, I remember reading some research showing that layoffs are one of America's biggest exports. And as American companies sort of globalize, we actually see an increasing prevalence of layoffs in the countries that they expand to. Essentially, the layoff itself is an oddly familiar and readily available tool for leaders today. It's convenient, right? They're familiar, they're comfortable. And so essentially the logic that many corporate leaders follow is in good times, you hire as many people as you can, and in bad times, or even if you're the slightest bit nervous about bad times, lay people off, right? And so this combination of companies doing it and then layoffs being seen as an easy go-to solution whenever we're stressed or anxious about the economy has combined to make this latest round of layoffs. And, the thing that really frustrates me is that all this is happening in spite of a growing body of research showing that layoffs don't actually cut costs over the long term or the short term because of severance pay, the cost of rehiring and retraining a workforce. And they also have enormous hidden costs in terms of the drop in morale, the drop in retention, the drop in engagement, the drop in performance, the drop in trust among survivors.
Wow, I think I'm gonna take some time to absorb your take on this. And I'm pretty sure this can be a debatable answer for our viewers too. Well, since the recession has affected almost every business, how are small and mid-sized businesses coping with it?
So, to my knowledge, small businesses in many sectors are actually like pretty desperate for workers right now. They're looking to hire, which is challenging, especially given higher standards being demanded by workers, higher standards in terms of both pay and also, remote work opportunities, increased flexibility, increased benefits. For small businesses and mid-sized businesses, they're not fighting the recession, they're fighting the fear of it, right? Like lots of small businesses, especially those that have that are B2B or that cater to larger corporate clients, their experience is that these corporate clients are now suddenly closing their coffers and are suddenly much more stringent and stingy with how they spend their money. That's a big challenge, right? Not the recession itself. I don't think we're in a recession quite yet, but again, this sort of cascading domino effect of fear, a fear of a recession. And that said, I know we've been talking quite a bit in this conversation about the case against layoffs. I also want to say that everything I've said so far is for the, large to medium large corporations, companies that are in a very different situation than small to mid-sized businesses. When huge companies make layoffs, it's not because they're going to cease to exist if they don't lay people off. It's almost always because they're expecting lower profits, like not even losses, like lower profits. And one of the reasons why I'm so hard on them is because they have so many tools at their disposal. They have salary cuts, they can cut perks, they can cut bonuses, they can accept lower profits, though, I'm sure their board won't be happy with that. They simply choose not to use them and use layoffs instead, the nuclear option. So small to medium-sized businesses don't have all the same tools. So when they make layoffs, it's often for the sake of their survival. And so a small business owner with 3 employees that has to lay 1 or 2 employees off, right, or 1 employee off, and is upset that they have to do that, is in a dramatically different situation, not even comparable situation to a multinational global company with hundreds of thousands of employees laying off, a tenth of their workforce, right? Dramatically different situation. So just want to keep that in mind. I think small and mid-sized businesses, like I mentioned earlier, are struggling because of this broader note of fear and anxiety permeating larger companies right now. If we look past that, I think, there continues to be a war for talent. Small businesses in particular are, really looking to innovate and trying to find new ways to reach good employees and to, continue meeting these changing expectations of the labor force. It's interesting, though I think that's a bit of a tangent of a topic, so I won't explore that too much.
Yeah, I think you are right about how the wall of actions and results changes when it comes to small businesses. So, what measures do you recommend companies to take to combat the disparities caused by layoffs?
The easiest way to combat demographic disparities due to layoffs is to not make layoffs and to pursue any of the many, many alternatives. I mentioned some of them below, right? Or earlier, salary cuts, cutting perks, cutting bonuses, accepting lower profits, retraining your workforce, promoting lateral moves, forgoing some promotions, tons and tons of things companies can do. So essentially, sit down, do that analysis, ask yourselves, are you at serious risk in the next 5 years or 10 years? Is there going to be some sort of existential threat to your business model, to your workforce, to anything? And then if so, what are all of your options? Sure, layoffs can be some of your options, right? But what are all of your options and what are the pros and cons of each? Now, if laying off employees is truly the only option available to you, which again, I'm still pretty skeptical of, but that's the case, and you want to minimize disparate impact, then the only thing you can really do is to plan ahead and conduct an assessment of who would be impacted by a planned layoff before you do it. So essentially, you ask yourself, great, this is going to be my layoff heuristic. I'm going to use last in, first out. Let's see who this impacts. And you do a demographic analysis of who that would be. If there are disparities, there are going to be disparities, then you ask yourself, how would a different heuristic change this? Can I use performance reviews? Can I have managers identify employees? That's not a great idea, it tends to be pretty biased. But essentially asking yourself, what can I do to minimize these disparities? And then to follow through with whatever that data recommends. Then, of course, that goes without mentioning the damage control that you have to do to make sure a layoff doesn't do even more harm than all the things that we've talked about, right? So giving employees an advance notice that they're going to be let go, giving them time to wrap up their current projects, to say goodbye, to take work samples with them, to sort of protect their dignity, offer generous severance, offer resources for employees who are going to be laid off to find their next positions, support the survivors, and work together to create a new path. All of this pales next to simply don't make layoffs, right? That continues to be my top recommendation.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick to your first statement here, not make layoffs. Well, Lily, your no nonsense guide to doing work and doing it right is an impressive publication. Who is it targeted towards? And can it assist individuals in handling the layoff scenario better?
So it's for anyone, right? Whether you are in the C-suite, whether you're a DEI practitioner or an employee volunteer in an employee resource group, who wants to do the work, who doesn't just want to talk about it or isn't just interested in it intellectually, but really wants to do it. To be frank, it wasn't written as a direct guide to handling layoffs, but the principles in the book are essentially what I've been saying over and over in this conversation: using data, centering outcomes, prioritizing the experiences of marginalized communities, getting to the root cause of problems rather than band-aid solutions, learning from the past. I've been essentially drawing on all of these principles in how I've tried to answer your questions here, because I think if we don't do these things, we risk making the same mistakes as the people before us, and we risk pursuing solutions that don't work, that might even make the problems worse. So I do believe that the book is useful for especially leaders who might be mulling over whether they should make layoffs. Please don't make layoffs. And I believe it's going to be quite valuable.
Sounds interesting. Now, what do you want to say to tech leaders who are blaming recession, unprofitability, and unpredictability in business as reasons for layoffs?
I think you probably know my opinion on layoffs at this point, but I'll use a metaphor, right? Laying off employees is like the equivalent of punching a hole in your wall. It's messy, it's painful, it's ugly, and it's hard to fix. You can say that you saw a spider on the wall, that you never liked the color of the wall, that all your friends are punching holes in their wall, but at the end of the day, you have to reckon with the fact that there were many alternatives, like do anything else, and you chose what you did. The bottom line is that, look, layoffs do enormous harm, not just to marginalized communities. I'm not saying this just because I'm a DEI practitioner, but to organizational health as a whole. They don't work. Layoffs, again, are the nuclear option. And especially in 2023, right? With so much knowledge of alternatives and so many case studies, by the way, of companies that have pursued other options than layoffs, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to see companies persist with the equivalent of the good old-fashioned, like, shooting yourself in the foot, right? That mass layoffs have become. So please consider otherwise. Truly, ask yourself, is this going to fix your problems? Are you doing this just because you think it's your only choice? And if so, please recognize that you have other options. You have other far less painful options that frankly are going to do a better job at solving the root problem you're concerned about than mass layoffs are. Thank you so much for having me here today and talking to me about this topic.
Great. I think you have so many emotions and logics for this topic, and I've personally enjoyed conversing with you over this. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Goodbye and have a great day ahead.